Welcome to another exciting webinar from Profit.co. Thank you all for joining us today. To start off, let's cover a few ground rules. Now that we've got that out of the way, a quick introduction to our organization, Profit.co. Profit.co is an enterprise class strategy execution SaaS platform. Based out of Silicon Valley, it is anchored by the most powerful OKR management tool in the market today. Our solution gives a complete picture of how your business and people process are integrated. Our strategy module aligns your long-term vision with your team's day-to-day tasks with our task management module. And we also help you achieve your goals aligned with the development and performance of your employees with our robust performance management platform and employee engagement modules. Our OKR software is recognized in the third consecutive year on Gartner's Hype Cycle for digital workplace. The application for our PMS module is featured in Gartner's market guide for employee performance management as well. Next slide, please. I am thrilled to introduce Netaji Karthik, our speaker for our webinar, Leveraging AI in Performance Management. Netaji brings 2 decades of experience extending beyond OKRs. Currently heading the consulting division at Profit.co, he has a distinguished career with a diverse portfolio. A career adorned with achievements, Netaji is also a growth leader at Profit.co, responsible for driving performance management product and revenue growth within the organization. Who better than Netaji to help us understand the role of AI in performance management? Netaji, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nisha. I'm so delighted. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever part of the world that you're joining from. So today we're going to start looking at how are we going to leverage AI in performance management. To simply sum it up, what else could be a much better word, much better buzzword to talk about these days, right? Other than being all about either you say it as AI or Gen AI. It's going to be, I think it's just being simply omnipresent everywhere. It's not just you talk about performance management, not just human capital management. It's present across each and every industry vertical. You name, let's say, retail, banking, manufacturing, transportation, you have it all. You talk about any functional area, right? Let's say like supply chain, let's say like your procurement, let's say talk about finance, you find the application areas of Gen AI to be present omnivorous across all the places. I mean, that's rightly said, like it's been really making a huge buzz in the organization, in the market. So why not talk about the influence of AI in performance management, right? So with that, let's jump on, right? I mean, we're going to precisely talk about 3 things. Obviously, everything starts with the why, right? A simple funda to bring on any change. Really need to understand the why, the problem statement. We're going to talk about various value propositions, the use cases wherein we can get the best out of AI in the world of performance management. And lastly, some practical considerations wherein, like, yes, we see the opportunities are abundant, but then definitely it needs to be used with little precaution and cost. Being a Gen AI, right? Definitely really want to make that nice touch between like what we can expose and what we cannot to the LLMs. So that's precisely what we're going to cover today, and supplemented finally with a quick case study, what we have done to other customers. So that's precisely what we have for today's session. So let's start with a quick peek on why we are here, or what's the problem statement that we are going to talk about. Probably let me bring in Nisha again. Nisha, probably since you made a pretty good, interesting introduction for me, I think this is kind of a stage for me to return the favor for you as well. But then it's going to be in a different aspect. I'm not going to do an intro. But I know, like, you as a manager, you literally run through various challenges handling your team apart from your operational day-to-day activities. Precisely when you have to handle your team in the area of performance reviews and appraisals, I know the different challenges that you have talked to me before in terms of aligning all the way with the goals, running down until the time you complete the appraisals, leading on to an effective high performance team, right? So I know like you've been spending a lot of significant efforts towards getting this right. Now, this is my gift or favor to you. What if I say you that, okay, Nisha, all of a sudden you are going to be a different person on the planet, unlike others having 24 hours in a day, you're going to get suddenly one additional hour. So your day is going to have 25 hours. Now, what's going to be your reaction? I know you're just going to be wowed, but apart from being wowed, what will you be doing if you get that additional 1 hour of working time for you?
See, before I heard your introduction, I would have said, okay, I would have had a cup of coffee and relaxed. But now, after I heard this introduction where you said AI is going to generally take over the entire world, now I am thinking I have to up my skills on AI. So I'll probably do some crash course or read up on AI. That's what I would do with the spare 1 hour with that.
All right. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Nisha, for sharing your quick insight. I know, like, I throw a sudden question out of the box. We didn't plan it for this webinar, but thanks for that answering that question all of a sudden. But for the readers and the participants on the call, the idea is that it's not just about like, okay, man, what is that we've been getting on, but the problem statement, what we've been really talking about is that that's a kind of a time, right? Maybe we talk about getting that one additional hour, but practically that's that amount of time, an additional time that every manager has to spend on handling their performance reviews to across all their employees that they've been handling on. So according to CEB research, it's literally like 200 plus of man hours that a manager has to do it on during their work time, literally translating to one hour in an entire day, right? So what does it mean is that for a person like Nisha, being a manager, has to account for it. Let's say that an usual resource, we kind of account for that human resource cost at $100 per an hour. This roughly translates to $500 in a week, $200 in a $2,000 in a month, and we've been talking about 24K savings cost in terms of what or how much we can do a much better things, right? So that's a kind of a hidden opportunity. I know like there are multiple benefits that comes around, but then it's so much visible that, okay, we really have a bunch of problems in a way of typically running our performance appraisal process. And obviously with a kind of a new technology like Gen AI, we should really be able to bring on much more improvements and innovations in the way how we drive the performance management. And ultimately, this is going to have a kind of a pretty good operational efficiency and leading to pretty good human resource cost optimization as well, right? So that's a pretty much one of the core reasons why the HR leaders, why the managers start exploring what I can do or what is the best that I can get out of Gen AI in terms of driving my performance management, right? So before we get on in terms of how AI is going to influence this, let's take a quick peek in terms of understanding how the industry being looking at this performance management. Or in other words, let's look at the trend as we talk about the performance management revolution, right? As you simply say, gone are the days I simply think about, okay, setting up or initiating a review towards the end of the year or at the beginning of the year and ask my employees to fill it out towards the end of the year and get their appraisals done. Gone are the days we talk about this kind of a typical set and forget methodology. It's a more of a multi-channel performance review. What do we mean by that? I really, as an employee, I really do not have to wait for my performance review to provide my feedback or to get my feedback. My performance review has to be continuous, regardless of if I have a performance review initiated or not, regardless of if I have my managers being set and monitoring me against certain set of goals or not, regardless of if I have someone that I'm supposed to get the feedback or not. So precisely said that if this is my timeline that runs from Jan, Feb all the way towards December, right? All throughout the year, I, as an employee, should be able to receive my feedback in a continuous mode from anyone and anytime. It doesn't necessarily have to be my manager, my peer, my matrix manager, my manager of manager, regardless of whomsoever the personnel, right? I mean, it could be even be someone, your external entities. You might be dealing with your suppliers, right? Your partners outside your organization. Literally, the revolution has to be in such a way that you should be in a way to receive your feedback from anyone, anytime throughout the year, right? And vice versa. At the same time, you should also be in a position to give that feedback to anyone as well. That's the way, right? That's the revolution, that's a transformation the performance management has been going through. And some call it as in terms of a continuous performance management, but that's precisely one kind of a component towards it. But I would say like these are the five core predominant components that should support this revolution. And out of which, obviously, AI-driven decision making is going to be one most important fact. And we're going to explore in the next 30 minutes what are we going to do and what best that we can get out of in terms of AI-driven decision making in my performance management. All right. So we set the stage. We talked about like why we really need to look at AI in the performance management. We talked about how the industry has been moving on, what are the core components, and obviously we picked up AI as one of the talking points, how it is going to enable or support this entire performance revolution journey, right? So let's start looking at what are the different value propositions that AI can bring in for the performance management. So think of it, the benefiters, as we talk about the AI value propositions, it could be definitely the HRs, HR business partners, the managers, and also all the employees. So obviously it is going to have a widespread benefits covering all the different stakeholders who will be getting benefited by using AI, right? But before, let me open up what are the common proportions wherein we can start looking at embracing AI in the performance management. Let's have a quick poll. Probably like we'll throw out like, okay, man, what do you think? I mean, you as a HR leaders or managers, what according to you do you think like, okay, man, wherein you'll be able to apply AI in the area of performance management? So I listed down some of the common functionalities out there, but let's see that how much it has been going on. You should be finding, I think, 5 or 6 options. One, obviously, we're going to talk about continuous performance feedback, and then focused learning development and biased appraisals. Then, obviously, going to automate the performance reviews, improve employee engagement. And I think these are some top 5 or most commonly used value propositions for AI. And we'll be curious to see like if you'll be having anything else beyond this 5 as well. So we also have another option, but feel free to type in what else you will be thinking as additional value propositions as well. Right, let's give a quick minute. All right, okay. So this is what we literally look at it, right? When I see like, obviously like we have pretty much most of the people aligning in terms of continuous feedback. And I see like equivalently, it gets most equal number of results as well. So thank you for all those inputs. When again, like nothing wrong, nothing correct, I would say like, but obviously all these things are going to be the value propositions. But then one thing that we need to look out is that being Gen AI implementation, definitely the ethical or the responsible way of implementing Gen AI, especially in performance management, because it's going to be so sensitive, critical as we're going to talk about employees' performance data. So that's going to be the critical one in terms of applying or exploring these value propositions before even have a consideration about like what else we could or what we could implement for the organizations, right? Thanks for the insights, for sharing your insights. But what according to me, right, man, I would say like I have a bunch of things, right, man, yes, obviously the 5 that you have voted on, obviously it makes sense. But if I have to list down, like what does it talk about as part of the value propositions? Number 1, obviously it's going to be the bias avoidance. So you being an HR professional, obviously you'd be more aware about the facts from Gallup, HR.com, wherein they focus so much about the percentage of performance reviews that goes for a toss in terms of biases. And a study says that a performance review can be impacted as much as like 12 different types of biases. Recency bias is one of the most prominent one because of the set and forget methodology. Recency bias is going to be the most crucial one. But obviously, like we should be able to streamline the way how performance reviews are done. And that's going to be the very first part of it, bias avoidance. Hypos identification. Who else not going to need superstars in their teams? That's going to be the creamy layer for any organization, right? And obviously everyone loves them. And for HRs, the most important aspect is that how am I going to nurture them and retain them, right? It's more about retaining my hypos. And it also talks about the fact, right? Then obviously, like organization do not want to spend more on hypos, or when I say spend more on hypos, it's more about you do not want to recruit hypos, right? In the sense like you really want to hire at the bottom, nurture them, groom them so that they get transformed into a hypos for your organization. So what you should be doing on that will help you to groom your top bottom layer all the way transformed into a hypos for your organization, right? And that's where you're going to talk about the supporting proportions, right? Wherein I should be able to understand the strengths and weakness of my employees and how can I nurture my the average performing employees. And that's where I need to have a personalized development plan supported by a competency-based coaching. So that streamlines back onto talent management and learning and development, right? Ultimately, these are all the things that is going to get feed onto my hypos identification and hypos, maintaining my hypos. Definitely, these are the creamy layer that I want to have in my organization at an optimal cost. And obviously, like we have few other things as well, multi-channel performance summarizer. So remember, a couple of slides back, we talked about how the industry trend has been moving. The multi-channel way of getting feedback from anyone, anytime through any channel. So gone are the days. Definitely, like I'm not simply relying only on my performance PMS system, right? That simply talks about, okay, this is the review, this is the assessment. I really need to start hearing out my employees, depending upon what they have done. It could be your Slack channel, Teams, it could be their own emails, it could be your engagement portal, it could be anywhere, right? So you really need to be have a multi-years in terms of understanding what's happening about your to your employee, right? And that's where a true 360-degree feedback or appraisal about employee can come on. And obviously, with multiple channels providing this information, it's just like the problem of many, right? When we started talking about digital transformations, we had multiple sources of data, and obviously big data is kind of a way to streamline those aspects. Just like the way when we have multi-channel way of getting the performance feedback, obviously Gen AI is going to be a solution for us to streamline the feedback from multiple sources of this information, right? And obviously automating performance review, it's going to be one of the facts. And for reasons, yes, I have factored in the penultimate order of questioning these proportions. And lastly, like employee sentiments, with all the pulse surveys, engagements happening on, definitely we really need to listen into what do people think about themselves or the organization, about the peers. So listening or understanding much more precise insights through employee sentiment analysis, that's another proportion that Gen AI can help us, right? So out of all these things, definitely I'm going to pick on the top three. We'll start looking at how we can identify, detect, or eliminate bias. We can start looking at how we'll be able to utilize AI for hypos and strength and weakness analyzer in the subsequent slides. So let's start with bias avoidance. As a leader, manager, HR people, we all know that, okay, we do the appraisals, we do get a final rating, but with AI in place, with with a bit of data analytics, let's take a different dimension to the way how we look at the performance appraisals. For a change, rather than looking at the final rating of the employee, let's try to visualize this assessment, the performance assessment, into different axes. So I'm going to split that in terms of an employee self-evaluation. So on the x-axis, I have a self-evaluation, and this is what an employee has rated about himself or herself. And on the y-axis, we're going to plot the final rating by the manager, kind of doing the managerial assessment for the self-evaluation. Now, when you try to plot this information, so kind of visualize this as a scatter plot, trying to get a pictorial view or a graphical view of how your performance has been factored or done in your organization, right? You'll be able to see a bunch of dots across all over the different quadrants boxes that you see over here. So the moment you kind of visualize this kind of a picturization of your performance evaluation, and obviously it's going to ring a bell for all the data analysts and data scientists, right? In terms of, okay, what's cooking over here, what's going well, and what is that I need to improve on. But let's take one step forward to look at it from a layman point of view. And obviously, like, I'm not a data scientist, and obviously I would need much more level of details. So when we kind of feed on this information and put on additional insights in terms of how we need to factor this kind of an information, making the models to interpret this kind of a visualization, it's going to give us three interesting insights. Number one which gets assigned on the slope. So being an X and Y, that's a slope that goes logically all the way to the top. This slope is the only portion of performance appraisals that has been done in an unbiased fashion. It doesn't matter whether I have a low rating for an employee, right, somewhere over here, or a very high rating for an employee. As long as my self-evaluation aligns with manager's evaluation, vice versa. So an employee rated himself herself as 2, and manager rates the same rating as 2, or the same way like 5 and 5, 4 and 4. These are all, and that precisely will represent a slope. And those are the ones precisely tells these are all unbiased appraisals, which means there is a bunch of other performance appraisals that really rise here as an anomaly over here. Those are all exceptions that we need to look at. So what do they mean to us? So number 2, it's time to look at the first anomaly or the exception. The one on the top, why does it happen? Literally, this is where we're going to talk about 4 different biases. The anomaly on the top could happen, either it could be due to leniency bias. So when I say leniency, as an evaluator, as a manager, I'm so lenient on my evaluations. So regardless of what my reports have rated them, I'm just going to say that, okay, yeah, you did much better than what you had thought of. I'm just going to be lenient. It's a leniency bias. We talked about halo bias, right? That's going to be one of the other ones. So it's more about, so when does that happen? It's more about the positive traits of an employee. So I look at one of my direct reports. I know by character, by personal traits, he has been so positive, and so that and it's so evident that regardless of his end results of the performance review, even though he's going to say rate himself a 3, because of the fact that I'm so overwhelmed by his positive traits, I'm just going to rate him and give him a higher rating, and that's nothing but a halo bias, right? Third one, the contrast effect. So literally, I'm rating on 2 different people, and the person that I evaluated first, he literally did a not really a great job. I see like, okay, that person, that candidate is like kind of a 2 or 3 potential candidate. And that's the kind of a profile that I'm getting on as I do the evaluation. And then suddenly I look at a little average performance profile. And but by human psychology, I immediately strike comparison with the previously completed appraisals, and I strike a contrast effect over here. Although this is average and only slightly better than the previous one because of the comparison, I'm going to rate this profile much better with a higher rating for this candidate, right? So put together, we've been talking about three kind of biases, but it's all about the nature of the manager to rate someone much higher than what that employee has rated himself or herself, right? That's a typical set of bias that bounds to happen much often. And no wonder the contrary, the reverse, the flip side of that also bound to happen, right? If we talk about leniency bias over here, and obviously, like I will also be able to have a severity bias. Just like how I was lenient as an evaluator, if I'm so strict, there is going to be a severity bias. In contrast to halo effect, wherein I'm just carried away by the positive traits of an employee. In contrast, I'm going to look at a horn effect bias, horn bias. This is where, even though the employee has really done well based upon his system of records, because of one of the negative traits of that employee, I'm just going to say that, okay, I feel like, okay, he's not really a better candidate, right? So that's a horn effect. And then there is a central tendency bias moving more towards a clustered of averages. And that could also be a calibration bias as well, right? So those are the different things. Pretty much it could impact the way how we run our typical performance evaluations. So with LLMs, with AI in place, when we model out based upon the past historic ones, we'll be able to identify such patterns and being able to identify and proactively prevent such kind of biases from happening. So that's one of the potential use cases we have seen, like, okay, I mean, organizations have been kind of so interested to implement as part of their performance review algorithms, moving towards a much more better unbiased appraisal process. All right, let's look at the second value proposition, hypos identification, right? So that's the cream layer for me. And obviously, like everyone within the HR organization, definitely, like I'm just going to be so excited to see like how I can get the best out of it, this kind of a value proposition. So let's think of a use case, right? Wherein a practical situation. It happens to me in my earlier organizations when I was been leading a bigger teams, wherein like we've been leading a larger team and responsible for revenue and growth. And we get into a deal and good science sales team cracked it. Now it's time to execute it. And we need manpower to do that, right? So obviously, like, yes, as part of resource management, resource allocation, there will be some buffer that will be accounted. But then let's say that this is going to be one of a more strategic projects for me. And if I do that well, I should be able to get more from the customer, from the client. So I really need to bring in my best talents to this program or initiative. And then if that being as a requirement being posted on to you as an HR personnel or as a leader or a manager, right? Let's look at this scenario, right? So, and this is where like we go jump beyond AI. We're going to look at Gen AI as a factor of supporting us in terms of how to bring the best out of the LLMs that gets trained for us behind the scenes. So as a leader, as a HR professional, I got a situation. I said like, okay, yeah, I see like this is a new banking project and I need the best in class players to lead this effort. So I'm just going to do a simple prompt to my performance review GPT model, saying that I need a tech lead with XYZ experience, with ABC skills, and this is needed for a newly acquired banking project, right? That's my problem statement. And I'm going to ask, okay, is that something which Gen AI, which has been running out my performance models, can recommend something for me, right? So depending upon the data points that we have fed on to the LLMs to model this information, it's going to throw back with nice set of suggestions in terms of, okay, who are all the top creams that you can look out for in terms of who will be the best for this assignment, considering the inputs that we have fed on. So I said, I need certain XYZ competencies, which is the full stack. I said the years of experience, I said the domain that I'm looking out for. So it throws me a bunch of recommendations saying that, okay, these are the people potentially you might be able to consider for your new programmer project. So think of a practical scenario, right? Man, in if not for Gen AI world, how that is really being orchestrated. So really, best case scenario, we maintain an employee database updated with the information of their competencies, their project information, their previous work experiences. And then we reach out to the resource management pool, or we reach out to the different managers of the organization. We try to get onto a conversation, gets onto multiple email back and forth conversations. We need to figure out like who is available, who is not available over a period of time. We really need to sort all those different aspects. And finally, we need to come up with, okay, probably this can be the potential team that we can put forth for this program. And now you're going to get all this information in a single click of a button, right? It's just going to be another version of prompt engineering, but then going to be so precisely tailored based upon your performance review data, right? So in a single click of a prompt engineering, I'm just going to get all this information that is so necessary for me to move forward, right? So that's precisely the second use case that we are going to look forward to, right? And for questions in terms of like, okay, how does this get to work? And obviously you really need to, and for the privacy and for the data sensitivity information, and that's something you cannot look out the public data sets. You really need to train your own LLM data models. So it's going to be a private LLM, which needs to be trained based upon your employees' master set, your employees' previous performance appraisal data, competencies information, certifications that they have done on, work experiences, their engagements, rewards, recognitions, their employee sentiments. All this information gets fed on to the LLM. That helps us to effectively comes with such kind of recommendations, right? So we talked about the second use case, how the hypos identification could be possible with the Gen AI exploration. The third use case. So I have a recommendation in terms of for all the people that I can look at. Now, probably like in reality scenarios, right? Maybe just a test data, but in reality scenarios, you should be able to get a large number of profiles. But then I can further tweak my prompts to precisely get into what do I need. Let's say like one of the next steps that I need to make further on is to understand probably like what are their plus and minus, their pros and cons, or their SWOT, their strengths and weakness of these employees. I really need much more detailed insights to understand probably like I can choose, or I should be choosing one among the three that is being recommended, right? So literally I need some additional insights, and that's where we're going to talk about exploring the strengths and weaknesses of an employee using, again, Gen AI. And it's going to be get triggered based upon a prompt again. So I'm going to say that, okay, can you provide more details about Tanman, the third profile, based upon the past performance appraisals? So I am really looking out for a way if I be able to get more information. So I look at all the profiles. I said like, okay, this is one profile that comes with relevant banking regulation experience as well. So I'm just going to be more curious about like, okay, if that's something I should be able to phrase it out on. And obviously, then depending upon the next level of information, the Gen AI can still provide with enormous amount of information precisely in terms of a strength and weaknesses of an employee. So I see like, okay, I mean, obviously the resource the recommended resource has a pretty good high level core competencies being captured on. And the core plus point is that there is a patent being filed for handling banking transactions. There is no significant weaknesses. There is on top of strength and weakness, I also see as a peer feedback. I see like this resource is going to be a real linchpin. So definitely like this is a kind of a resource that I will be needing it on. However, there is also some other suggestion or improvement areas. So it needs to be a team player. So I said like, okay, probably like
I should be handling it through proper R&R or raising matrices. So I'm going to get prompted with, again, such kind of a detailed information that's going to help me with the decision making. Again, like think about the scenario, right? When you have to do this profiling, right? It obviously goes on to multiple evaluations. Literally, when you get recommended profiles for any program, you bring in the evaluation team, you share the profiles with them, and it goes on multiple rounds of evaluation, and they really need to do evaluations 1 or 2 rounds with multiple people. You talk about the time investment that needs to be done both from an evaluator perspective and then from an assessee perspective. And with these kind of explorations in terms of GenAI helping us with the strengths and weakness, we should be able to narrow it down in terms of what we really need to focus on, right? So that's going to be the pretty great use cases, what we can literally look out in terms of making GenAI to really do magical wonders for us. So with that, obviously, I'm jumping out from the value proportions. So we talked about multiple application areas, how we can get the best out of it. But it's also equivalently important to consider what is my ethical AI implementation considerations. We call that as a responsible AI, right? So obviously, we really need to put much more focus on data privacy, considering PII, GDPR, right? We cannot take the information for a task. So data privacy is going to be the predominant one. Governance and control. This is going to be a sensitive information. We cannot let each and everyone to access all this kind of information. So let the LLMs to be modeled precisely having the RACI matrix in mind and who can see whose information. So that's going to be get controlled. Workforce roles and model. What does it really mean is that although I talked about the different use cases out here, never ever I said that, okay, we're going to make or we're going to let Gen AI to make the decisions. The decision making should have to be still be human centric, right? We do not want the machines to make wrong judgmental decisions. We can get the AI to support the betterment of us, but not to really replace. So literally what does it mean is that Gen AI is here to help us as a supporting tool and or a framework, but not as a way to replace the existing things. And lastly, if you implement AI in your organization, what's our morals, what's our use cases that you plan to implement? Apparently, you really need to bring in 100% transparency. You need to let your employees know that what are we going to do with Gen AI and how it is going to help us, help the organization, help the employees, and what is not it is supposed to do. Clearly, the responsibilities, the interpretability of applying or implementing Gen AI needs to be clearly documented. But ideally, that needs to go as part of a change management, right? While it is so easy for us to look at all the value propositions, so alluring, so attracting for us to do all those, explore all these implementations, we understand that literally like the way the AI innovation started and how it is going on, really need to take a step back. The market is really out here. And until the point we have stability, we have much more guidances being established. It's really not wise to jump to implement all the possible potential use cases with Gen AI. And that's why, like, if you see here, I literally deprioritized automated performance reviews. We do not want a Gen AI to make a judgmental rating on behalf of managers. So obviously the manager has to make the final say. Right. So with that, to end this part, so that's one of a famous quote from one of the CEOs in a US company. We've been talking about how Gen AI can bring in benefits for an organization. Obviously, unbiased, leading to an unbiased performance review. That's going to be the topmost important aspect. And quoting the fact that that's what it is going to help the managers to save a lot of time. That's how you're going to bring much more operational efficiency improvements in the organization. So with that, we conclude the topics that we wanted to cover for this webinar. And with these topics, like, so at Profit, how we can help your organization. So literally, like, we have we at Profit, while apart from being providing a PMS product, we also have a consulting division that helps you in taking the right steps. As I mentioned, we do not want to jump into details so soon. We really need to take a much more informed decision. Really need to understand what is there at the moment, what is my assess process, and what is the bridge that I need to cover as part of the to be process, and slowly take it up as a part of a crawl, walk, run, fly approach. So that's what we do it on. And one case study that we have implemented this approach for one of customers in a industrial space, right? I mean, that's what we did. We know like this has been the core problem statement for them. So there has been a much more operational inefficiencies across different layers. And after implementing, by running through this layered approach, we've been able to bring in business benefits precisely in terms of operational efficiency across all the layers, in terms of HR and HRBPs, for the managers and the leaders, and for all the employees as well, collectively leading on to some kind of an estimated cost benefits as well. So with that, yeah, we can take up any Q&A, just a quick slides from some of the workshops, the strategic workshop that we do as part of the consulting sessions. Thank you, Nisha. Sorry, you're on mute, Nisha. Nisha, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Netaji, for this insightful webinar and helping us look at the reality of how AI is going to transform our everyday lives and most importantly, performance management. Some of the questions we have here now, Miguel wants to know what is HIPPO?
Okay, so that's an abbreviation for referring to high potential employees. So HI, high PO potential. So now that's a HR terminology. People refer to the star performers as hypos.
Yeah, okay. So the other person wants to know, can you please share the reference resource links in the discussion window panel?
Definitely, like the stats that we published in the notes, it comes with the link wherein we have that, wherein we have picked up that resource or statistics information. So when you share this information, when you share this webinar deck, and it's going to get shared along with it.
Okay. Thank you. Laurie wants to know, how does the AI know the person's performance? Is it based on pure hard KPI numbers or other indicators?
So this is where the beauty of incorporating OKRs into PMS is going to make that magical wonders. Normally, in any performance reviews, we purely focus on the KPIs, focusing purely on quantitative aspects. With OKRs in play, you will also be able to handle both qualitative and quantitative aspects. So by default, AI would be able to know the performance based upon the contribution of employees to those OKRs. It could be your leading efforts in terms of qualitative initiatives, or it could be the actual final outcomes measured based upon KPIs. So that's how it is going to understand and interpret a person's performance.
So we have another question. What kind of data is needed to train AI models for performance management?
Okay, I think we touched based on this. Definitely, we need to have this all kind of inputs, right? In terms of goals, performance reviews, past appraisals, competency, skills, certifications, the multi-channel feeds about that employees. These are some of the notable information wherein we can feed this information to the LLMs, but the crux lies in how good we train this LLM models. So that's going to be the crucial one.
The next question here we have, how can we measure the ROI of using AI for performance management initiatives?
Okay, so we also had a case study, which I just displayed prior to this one. So we measured based upon the improvements in terms of operational efficiency. And operational efficiency will also lead on to being able to calculate in terms of the cost savings for us. In most organizations, the low-hanging fruit is in able to track the total turnaround time for an organization to drive their end-to-end performance advices.
Thanks for that. And the next is an interesting question. Callie Stephens wants to know, how would the pay of a manager be impacted by the smaller workload? If they have to do less work, won't they have to be paid less?
Okay, so if you remember, I made a statement that the judgmental decisions should not be driven by AIs. That still has to be with the managers. So we do not let data to dictate that question. Really need to let the managers to make an informed decision based upon what AI would recommend.
So Laurie has an additional question on the first question she asked. And how is the additional data got collected? I'll read the first question just for reference. How does the AI know the person's performance? Is it based on pure hard KPI numbers or other indicators?
Okay.
And for that,
okay.
yeah.
All right. So again, like I really want to go back to Profit as a platform, right? With Profit, you define your top level strategies. You know, like what you're contributing to the company level strategies. You have visibility to OKRs or contribute to OK. So OKR is a separate module within Profit platform as well that talks about your contribution to the operational and tactical strategies. And there is also a task management in place as part of the Profit platform. It tracks your day-to-day activities. And then you also have an engagement portal, which talks about what kind of rewards recognition that you've been getting it on. So, and then the platform also supports integrations with multi-channels in terms of Teams, Slacks. So for a moment, let's say like I'm going to appreciate you, Nisha, for doing something, right? So I tag you saying that, okay, Nisha, I mean, you did a good job in organizing this webinar. And literally that's a kind of a positive feedback that I'm providing, but through another channel. And as long as we have all this information integrated and feed onto the LLMs, we should be able to get this. So obviously, integrations is a key word.
Thanks for that. And we have a question from Sophie. Can the tool help with creating OKRs?
Yeah, of course. Whatsoever the Gen AI GPT model that I showed, that's predominantly from a PMS aspect. So if you look at the OKR version of the product, there is a similar GPT model that helps you to come up with recommended OKRs as
well. Okay. We have one from Caitlin. Do you have recommendations on getting employee buy-in when it comes to utilizing Gen AI? I can imagine there is some resistance to using AI, especially for performance reviews.
You know what? I would rate this question as the topmost question. So this leads a way to the practical implementation. The resistance, it's going to be obvious, unlike any changes, right? And just similar to any other changes. You talk about people, process, technology, anything that you bring in, there is always going to be a resistance that we need to address it by change management. Remember the responsible AI consideration that I talked about, the 4 different steps. Those are the leading indicators or the initiatives that you need to take on to handle these resistance. Literally, yes, it is a must to get employees buy-in, right? People should not get, this is a kind of a sensitive implementation, right? When people should not, you should not distill the fear of Gen AI. Instead, people really need to feel motivated. They are going to really get supported by Gen AI to do their job much more better. So that's the transformation that we need to focus on as part of handling this resistance.
Okay, thanks, Netaji. We have one question from Venkat. What challenges may arise when implementing AI in performance management?
It depends upon the model that you train, but obviously, like the point that we talked about, I mean, while we talked about the way how we can avoid performance biases, you can also be assured that if you do not train the model well, even Gen AI can also lead on to certain biases as well. So that's why I say, like, okay, it's all about how you get your data engineers to work on train your LLM models. And unfortunately, this is one area where you cannot rely or you cannot even integrate your LLMs with the publicly available data models. You really need to build one of your own, right? And obviously, like the problems or challenges in terms of getting the right amount of data. Really, we really need to make a transformation. Definitely, this is not data analytics, right? So with data analytics, we're going to look at it as a form of AI. But then we have been talking about a transformation towards Gen AI. It's going to provide much more proactive recommendations. So it's more about the challenges is going to get the accuracy of the data model to be right.
Okay, yeah. So we have another interesting question. What are AI's potential possible biases in performance-related applications?
Repeat that again, Nisha.
What are AI's potential possible biases in performance-related applications?
Okay, definitely like it is a simple example to explain this, right? Definitely to get this right, you really need to have a large volume of data. For example, you start with the aspect that you got in all the related engineers to build this model, and you start training this out. But then the historical data that you have, it spans only for the last 1 or 2 appraisals. And obviously, even as we talk about the recency bias, it's also going to be biased based upon the last two factors as well. You also need to ensure that the right set of competency mapping that needs to happen on. So, and this is where, if you look at any PMS solution, not just profit, if you look at any PMS solution, there will be a way wherein you start looking at associating your employees' performance with the respective competencies that needs to be built, either based upon their roles and responsibilities or based upon their job grade, their titles. Somewhere the competency matrix has to be aligned as well, right? So look at all the different data points that you have been inputting on, and if you have a leniency towards that data points, definitely there are potential aspects. There is going to be a leniency bias, or it's going to be a recency bias. The most important fact is that definitely like you will be able to get rid of halo effect or horn effect. Those are all human perceptions things. So that's going to be get ridden completely. But what's our bias? That could still be an exception based upon improper data points. That's still a potential impact that you can expect.
Yeah, Sophie has another question. What talent resources are needed to build this model?
Probably I need to defer this question for our engineering team, Nisha.
Yeah.
We can take this offline for Sophie. Probably I might not be the right person to comment on this.
Okay. I think with that, we are coming to the end of all the questions. Does anybody, okay, now we have one more. How can a manager assure themselves that any cognitive bias reflected within performance assessment may be mitigated against particular type 1 and type 2 errors?
Okay. I think the person who asked should be having some role as part of data science. Type 1, type 2, definitely most important ones to be accounted for as part of any modeling. I mean, forget about Gen AI. It starts from the place wherein we started talking about all the statistics, right? Definitely, we really need to consider what are the false positives, what are the false negatives that we have at the moment as part of model validation. Just like the way you bring up a statistical model and try to get your model validations right. Similar to the way, a similar effort that needs to be put on for your LLM model validation. Remember the slide that we talked about, wherein we have a scatter plot of evaluation plotted between manager evaluation and the self-evaluation, and try to picture out the anomalies. Precisely, that's where that should be the one aspect wherein we need to look out biases as well. We really need to compare it against based upon the model's predicament, right? Wherein is this the similar one that my model predicts, or or do my model predict something in a quadrant which is not supposed to be, or it's a vice versa? That's where we're gonna precisely be able to understand the type 1 and type 2 errors. So it needs to get aligned based upon your LLM model validation.
Thanks, Netaji, for solving all the questions. And except for that one question, we'll get dialed back to that person. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, Netaji, for taking the time to answer all the queries. And thanks again until we meet again for another webinar from Profit.co.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, everyone.